Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Rendezvous with Yesterday by Dianne Duvall. Narrated by Kirsten Potter. Chapter 1. Houston, Texas, present day. Bethany Bennett flipped through the CDs piled at her feet. "Seriously, Josh, we need to scrape together enough money to put a new stereo in this piece of crap." Without taking his gaze from the highway, her brother laughed. "What's wrong? Can't find anything you want to listen to?" "No!" Most of the CDs had belonged to their parents and featured music from the 70s and 80s. Beth was in more of a disturbed kind of mood, but couldn't play her MP3s on the car's outdated system. Josh reached down and retrieved another stack of CDs from beneath the driver's seat. "How about some Hendrix?" Her mood lightened. "Okay." As she slipped a CD into the player, the air conditioner began to screech again. She grimaced. Even with the AC on full blast, dragging wisps of hair from her long brown braid and tickling her bangs, the heat stifled Beth, raising beads of moisture on her skin and making breathing difficult. Of course, the bulletproof vest she wore didn't help. Though the Type 2 wasn't as bulky as the higher classification vests Josh had tried to talk her into getting, she still found it uncomfortable. The white tank top beneath it clung damply to full breasts mashed flat. Her snug blue jeans made her wish she could have worn breezy shorts, and her feet, encased in heavy boots, felt as though they roasted in a barbecue pit. She shifted uncomfortably. The shoulder holster encasing the Glock 9mm beneath her left arm pinched a bit as she adjusted the holster on her left hip that carried the Ruger 9mm. She glanced at Josh to see if he was equally uncomfortable and smiled. His short, wavy brown hair gleamed in the sunlight as he bobbed his head to the music. Pretty much every female friend Beth had had since middle school had deemed him hot and driven her crazy, drooling over him. Today, his strong jaw bore dark stubble that lent him a rugged look, and his trim, athletic body was clad in blue jeans, a black T-shirt, and his own Type 2 bulletproof vest. Once they left the city behind them, Josh orchestrated a series of turns that landed them on a barely discernible dirt road. When that road abruptly ended in a dense forest, he slowed the car to a stop and cut the engine. "Are you ready?" Heart pounding, she nodded. "I'm ready." He studied her carefully as he removed his sunglasses. "You look nervous." "Maybe a little," she admitted. He swore. "I wish Grant could have come instead." "Grant is in San Antonio, so you're stuck with me," Beth countered. "Besides, you said this was a long shot." Long shot or not, I don't want you here if there's even the slightest chance we may run into Kingsley or Vergoma." Both Kingsley and Vergoma faced murder charges and had jumped bail. Rumors of violence against women swirled around the duo as well, but such charges had yet to be brought against them. Josh had done his damnedest to limit Beth's role in the family bounty hunting business to skip tracing, ferreting out information on the internet and over the phone that could lead to the criminal's capture. Beth was particularly skilled at such. But with their partner, Grant, gone, Josh had had no choice but to extend her participation in his search for Kingsley and Vergoma and let her back him up on this jaunt. After much digging, Beth had uncovered the name of a little-known ex-girlfriend of Kingsley's, a very bitter and vindictive ex, she had learned when she had tracked down the woman's phone number and contacted her. It had taken surprisingly little effort to weasel out the location of an old hunting shack Kingsley had used when they were together. That woman really wanted Kingsley to go down. Though authorities believed the two men had either headed to San Antonio to seek shelter with known associates or fled to Mexico, Josh had thought the tip worth pursuing. Bail jumpers almost always returned to their comfort zones, and, according to Kingsley's ex, this hunting shack was his hidden comfort zone. Beth raised one eyebrow. Are we going to do this or what?" Muttering beneath his breath, Josh exited the car and stuffed the keys into his back pocket. She opted not to grumble over him not wanting her to accompany him. She knew he didn't mean it in a "you're a puny girl and shouldn't be running with the big boys" kind of way. He just loved her and wanted to protect her. They had lost both of their parents by the time Beth turned 18 and Josh 24, so the two of them were all each other had. As she opened the passenger door and got out, Beth's triumphant smile transmogrified into a grimace. No longer held at bay by the struggling air conditioner, heat and humidity assaulted her, sparking instant misery. She opened the back door as Josh circled the trunk. Kingsley and Vergoma's case files lay on the back seat, along with a stun gun, pepper spray, 2 pairs of handcuffs, leg irons, and a couple of navy blue jackets with "bail enforcement" emblazoned on the back in bright yellow letters. Beth reluctantly donned the smaller jacket, more to thwart West Nile-carrying mosquitoes than to identify herself as a bounty hunter and prevent any confusion if law enforcement should arrive on the scene. Law enforcement wouldn't arrive on this scene. They didn't even know this place existed. She pulled out the backpack. Josh halted when he saw it. "What's that?" "Mark made me promise to bring it." "What the hell for? What's in it?" "Water, first aid stuff, my cell phone, extra ammo." She tucked her arms through the loops and hoisted it onto her back. "Mark packed most of it. He said it's best to be prepared for anything." Mark was their next-door neighbor and closest friend. "You are not bringing that," Josh informed her. "Take it off." "No, I told him I'd wear it." "You only agreed to bring it because you're attracted to him." Guilty heat stole into her cheeks. "I am not." "Yes, you are. You know damn well if you weren't seeing someone else, you would have jumped him by now." She sure as hell would have. Mark was hot. "What woman wouldn't? He's freaking gorgeous." Over 6 feet tall, with a tight, muscled body, black hair that fell several inches below broad shoulders, a neatly trimmed mustache and beard she had fantasized about abrading her skin, a chiseled jaw, soulful eyes so dark brown they almost matched his hair. Yeah, she totally would have jumped him if he weren't taken. "Besides, Mark isn't a bounty hunter," Josh pointed out. "No, but we've both suspected for some time now that he works for the CIA or FBI or one of those other agencies that has something to do with national security." Mark claimed he worked in the private security business, but all those weird hours he keeps, the monochromatic wardrobe. "Dude always wears black," Josh muttered. "The cloak and dagger secrecy crap, and the wounds we've seen him come home with late at night. It's like living next door to a freaking agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Josh shook his head as he pulled his jacket on over the shoulder holster that encased his Glock 9mm. "The pack stays, Beth." He thrust the handcuffs in one pocket, the pepper spray in the other, and clipped the stun gun to his belt. "It'll only slow you down, especially in this heat." The heat index was supposed to reach 110 today. Typical Houston summer. Beth raised her chin as she looped the strap of their pistol-grip shotgun over one shoulder. "The pack goes." Almost against his will, it seemed, Josh smiled. "You think you have enough weapons there, sport?" She glanced down. With 2 9mm, the shotgun, and the tiny .22 Josh didn't even know she had tucked in one boot, she supposed she did. Beth sent him a teasing grin. "I don't know. I think we could use a few more." Shaking his head, he popped the trunk and reached inside. "You know how rarely bounty hunters have to draw weapons." "When they aren't butching it up on TV," she added. "Exactly. In all this time, I've only drawn mine once, and I've only had to use the stun gun twice." She shrugged. "Mark said there was something about these guys that made him nervous. I trust his instincts." And her own. Despite the bravado she attempted to convey, she kept feeling like something was going to go very, very wrong. Just keep in mind that legally we're only allowed to use lethal force if our own lives are threatened." He held out a sheathed hunting knife. "Here, take this." Beth took it and stared down at it, uncomprehending. What do you want me to do with it? Hadn't he just razzed her about having too many weapons? He closed the trunk. "Strap it to your other thigh." "Okay." She did, wondering what possible purpose the knife would serve. "There's a compass in the handle," Josh reminded her. "Oh, right. Keep an eye on it. If we become separated or if something foul goes down, I want you to use it to find your way back to the car and get the hell out of Dodge." Beth nodded, knowing she would never leave Josh behind, but seeing no point in arguing. "Okay, let's get going. Keep your steps quiet, and the moment you feel that pack slowing you down, drop the damned thing." Keeping her steps quiet proved to be impossible. Texas still suffered from a severe drought, so the ground beneath her feet bore no grass. Dried and cracked, the heavy clay soil felt as hard as concrete beneath her boots. A thick layer of crisp brown leaves coated it, having fled the parched and dying trees above them. Weeds and saplings struggled to survive, their limbs snapping at the slightest touch. Beth kept her face impassive, though inwardly she grimaced. Oppressive heat pressed down on her like a pair of hands on her shoulders, weighting every step. Within minutes, sweat saturated her clothing and dampened her hair, Josh's too. The plethora of leaves that crunched beneath their boots left gaping holes in the canopy above, allowing the sun to bombard them at will, and not even the hint of a breeze stirred the few leaves that still clung to brittle branches. Though Beth worked hard to stay in shape, exercising and lifting weights 6 days a week just couldn't combat the effects of the weather. With every step, her backpack felt heavier, her mouth grew drier. Several times she had to reach back and adjust the shotgun strap to keep it from sliding off when her shoulders slumped with weariness. No complaint crossed her lips, however, as she used the compass to monitor their location. It felt as though they trekked through the trees for half an hour or more before Josh stopped and held up one hand. Beth halted, then moved forward as quietly as possible until they stood shoulder to shoulder. Josh dipped his head and whispered in her ear, "The hunting shack should be just through those trees over there, maybe a quarter of a mile ahead. I want you to stay here while I go check it out." "No way," she hissed back. "I'm going with you." He shook his head. "I'm not going to try to apprehend them by myself, Beth. I just want to see whether or not Kingsley and Vergoma are there. If they are, and it's just the two of them, I'll do a little recon, determine the best approach to make, then come back here and we'll go in and apprehend them together. And if they're not alone, we'll have to see if Mark would be willing to come out and back us up since Grant isn't in town." Beth wanted to protest further, but Josh crept forward before she could, amazingly light on his feet considering his height and heavy muscles. Swearing silently as he disappeared through the brush, she eased the backpack off her shoulders and set it on the ground at her feet. Minutes crawled by as her heart tapped out a nervous rhythm in her chest. Beth curled her right hand around the grip of her Glock, drawing it from the shoulder holster. She strained to hear any sounds beyond the buzzing of mosquitoes, twittering of birds, and chatter of squirrels. Swatting a mosquito, she mentally castigated Josh for leaving her behind like this to worry instead of... Gunshots split the air. Starting violently, she froze, eyes widening, heart racing. "Josh!" Several interminable seconds passed before Beth could force her leaden feet to move. Adrenaline surging through her veins, she raced forward in the direction Josh had taken, terrified of what she might find. Josh, Josh, Josh! A gnarled tree root reached up and tripped her, but she managed to stay on her feet as she stumbled unexpectedly into a small clearing. Josh stood several yards away, up and to her right, his back to a tree, Glock in hand. Beyond him stood a ramshackle cabin, barely bigger than a garden shed. Josh's eyes widened when he caught sight of her. More gunshots sounded. Bark splintered from the tree just above his head. "Beth!" A bullet slammed into her left shoulder. Staggering backward, she glanced down as burning pain invaded her arm. Josh fired into the brush on one side of the cabin. Raising her own 9mm, Beth followed suit and fired half a dozen times as she backed toward the trees. Branches snapped as a large body fell forward out of the brush. Kingsley. Her ears ringing from the shots, Beth ducked behind a tree. The stale smell of gunpowder filled the air. Her rapid heartbeat pounded in her ears. She tightened her hold on the 9mm, gritting her teeth as the throbbing in her shoulder and arm increased. Damn, it hurt. Licking dry lips, she tasted the salt of her own sweat as she peered around the rough tree trunk. Another gunshot sounded. Bark exploded from the tree, shielding Josh, no more than an inch from his face. Her fear doubled. Where the hell was the second shooter? She studied every tree and bedraggled shrub she could see without sticking her head out far enough to draw fire. Nothing. She swore. Josh was trapped. He would be totally exposed if he made a run for it, and, judging by the shots she'd heard and seen him fire, he was probably low on ammo. Beth slid the shotgun off her shoulder, caught his eye, then tossed it to him. He grimaced as he caught it. Leaning forward, he pressed the hand, still holding his Glock to his side, drawing her gaze to the hole in his vest. More bullets nicked the tree as he ducked back behind it. So close! Panic invaded her. A terrible trembling began somewhere deep inside. Her breath shortened as she struggled to pull the Ruger 9mm from the holster on her hip and flip the safety. She almost couldn't do it. Her left arm didn't want to cooperate. "Run!" Josh ordered. She shook her head helplessly. No way would she leave him here like this. He peered around the tree, then squatted down. Bark burst from the trunk just above his head. Josh swore viciously. "Then cover me. He's at your 9 o'clock." Hard in her throat, she nodded, then leaned to one side and fired into the foliage up and to the left. Josh took off running toward her. Beth continued to fire, searching the brush for any hint of movement that would let her know exactly where the shooter hid. Blood suddenly spurted from Josh's right thigh. His leg buckled, sending him to the ground out in the open with no cover. Beth's breath stopped. Before the dust had even settled, another bullet pierced his left arm. "No!" Tears blurring her vision, Beth burst from the cover of the tree, firing blindly in the direction Josh had told her to with both the Ruger and the Glock. Before she could reach Josh, a bullet struck her in the back. Pain careened through her. All strength seemed to leave her legs as she tumbled forward and landed face down in the dirt. The hard-packed earth scraped her forearms like cement when she threw them up to keep her head from hitting the ground. Dust flew up and invaded her eyes as her body went limp. Her breath vanished, sucked away in an instant, filling her with terror. Beth fought to draw air into her lungs but couldn't. All she could do was listen to her abnormally loud heartbeat and futilely fight her body's attempt to suffocate her. From what felt like a long distance, she heard Josh emit a roar of either grief or fury. Even the blasts from the shotgun that followed seemed strangely muffled. Terrified that Josh was on the receiving end rather than the firing end of those booms, Beth dug deep down into an unknown reserve of strength and struggled to draw her legs up under her. Bracing her hands on the ground, she managed to rise as far as her knees. Her Glock was empty, so she dropped it and rubbed her gritty eyes with quaking fingers in an attempt to clear her vision. Josh struggled to his feet, his horrified gaze pinned to her. Still gripping the Ruger, she twisted slightly and saw the second shooter lying dead, half in, half out of the brush. Vergoma. He must have circled around behind her. Unless... had others joined them? Were there more of them out there somewhere, watching with weapons drawn? A clatter drew her attention back to Josh. The shotgun now lay on the ground. Beth shook her head sluggishly. She needed to warn him that there might be others, but she still struggled for breath and couldn't find her voice. Dizziness assailed her, made worse by the wagging of her head, the only warning she could conjure. "They're alone," Josh gritted, managing to gain his feet. Wavering, he stood hunched over with one arm pressed against his side. "Beth!" He staggered toward her. Pain and apprehension tightened his features. He stared down at her chest, then met her gaze before his eyes rolled back in his head and his body sank bonelessly to the ground. Beth tried to call his name but could produce no sound, nor would her legs support her when she tried to stand. Feeling weaker by the second, she glanced down. Blood, warm and wet, stained the sleeve of her jacket. More warmth blossomed beneath her vest. Dropping the Ruger, she parted the front of her jacket with uncooperative fingers and stared in astonishment at the substantial holes in her vest. Ruby liquid seeped from beneath the lower edge and began to stain her jeans. Nausea rose. Blackness floated on the periphery of her vision. Beth sank back on her heels, but even then could no longer remain upright. Tumbling backward, she barely felt it when her head struck the hard soil. Dappled sunlight winked down at her between the green and brown leaves above her. Turning her head, she focused on Josh with cloudy vision. He lay, unmoving, only a couple feet away to her left. Forcing her burning left arm to do her bidding, she reached out and just managed to brush his hair with her fingertips. Tears filled her eyes and spilled down her temples. Was he dead? She managed to draw in a short, jagged breath. Warm, salty liquid pooled in her mouth, threatening to choke her. When Beth coughed, flecks of blood flew from her lips, and agony shot through her chest and back, down her arm, so intense she almost lost consciousness. But she didn't. She couldn't pass out. She had to get help. Josh needed her. She had to find help. Curling her fingers in her brother's hair, she clutched a dusty, silky fistful. She had to get help. A shadow fell across her. Blinking, Beth stared up in confusion as a tall figure swathed in black robes and a cowl entered the clearing. Fear rising, knowing she had to protect her brother, she dragged her left hand back to her side and curled it around the grip of the Ruger she had discarded. She groaned as she raised her arm. Tears of pain streamed down her temples. Her aim wavered wildly as her muscles trembled. The new menace loomed over her, his dark robes fluttering and fanning a slight breeze across her that carried with it the scent of exotic spices. "Who are you?" she whispered. He sank onto his haunches beside her. "I have come for you, Bethany." His deep voice held the hint of a foreign accent. His large hand closed around her wrist, his touch gentle. Nevertheless, the Ruger fell harmlessly to the ground with a clatter. The pain in her chest increased, clawing at her and tempting her to seek solace in oblivion. A strange wind rose, tugging at his cowl and allowing her a brief glimpse of his face. It was the last thing Beth saw before darkness claimed her. England, 1203. Dense forest surrounded the four knights as they made their way home. Birds twittered and sang as the branches that supported them swayed in the cool breeze. Squirrels barked their displeasure at the figures that rode past, nearly drowning out the soft thumps the horses' hooves made each time they touched the ground. Lord Robert, Earl of Fosterly, drew in a deep breath as they left Tarrington's land and crossed onto his own. 'Twas foolish to think the air smelled sweeter here, but to a fourth son who had never thought to acquire either land or a title, Fosterly was the most beautiful place in all of England. "I still think the air of Fosterly smells sweeter than any other," Sir Michael said, echoing his thoughts. Robert smiled. "You will hear no arguments from me." The youngest of the powerful Earl of Westcott's 6 children, Robert had been destined for the church until his 2 eldest brothers had been killed, the first whilst defending his king during the revolt of 1174, and the second in an accident whilst competing in a tournament. Both of his sisters, like their mother, had died in childbirth. When Dylan, the only sibling Robert had left, had accompanied King Richard to the Holy Land, their father had begun to worry he might lose all of his children, and had advised Lord Edmund, the man to whom Robert had been sent to foster, to keep a careful eye on him and ensure he came to no harm. Of course, Robert had come to harm. Harm Lord Edmund had been unable to guard him against, and one his father could not have anticipated. At the age of 10 and 8, Robert had fallen deeply in love with Eleanor, a tiny bit of a girl with light brown hair and amber eyes so pale they were nigh golden. How he had adored her, and the son she had borne him. Then all had been taken from him. Pain, like the ache of an old war wound, filtered through him as he remembered her brother finding him on the practice field that day. And once more he found himself wondering why the worst memories always seemed to be the most vivid and easily recalled. There had been no recent rains. The river had not raged. There had been no reason at all for the bank to give way beneath her feet, as Eleanor had walked alongside her brother with baby Gabriel snug in her arms. But give way it had. Though her brother had lived, Eleanor and Gabe had both drowned. His son's precious little body had never been found. Robert had searched for days, in the water, along the banks, in the surrounding forest, beset by fears that animals might find Gabe first. Then Lord Edmund had forced him back to the castle and poured wine and ale down his throat until darkness had stolen the pain. When Robert had awoken, it was to find a messenger from Westcott leaning over him, bringing news of his father's death. It had been a dark time in Robert's life. It had been a dark time in his brother Dylan's life as well. As soon as the news had reached him, Dylan had returned from the Holy Land, but it had been a different Dylan, greatly changed by whatever horrors he had witnessed in Outremer. Quiet, grim, haunted by Robert knew not what, until Alyssa had taught Dylan how to laugh again. Robert's spirit lightened once more. "And what has inspired that smile?" Michael asked. He shook his head. "I was thinking of the many unexpected twists and turns the path of life takes." "Any turn in particular?" he asked curiously. "Alyssa." Michael nodded. He and the two men who rode behind them were amongst the few who did not fear Robert's sister-in-law. Poor Dylan. People had been wary of him and feared him for his ferocity on the battlefield long before he had married Alyssa, but now that he had chosen for his wife a woman reputed to be a sorceress, England's populace was utterly terrified of him. Of them both, actually. "By marrying your brother," Michael commented, "and swiftly producing a son, Lady Alyssa has denied you the title of Earl of Westcott." Robert nodded. Dylan had been grooming him for the title since their father's death. "And yet, had she not married my brother, I would not love her like a sister, and would not have taken such offence when Lord Hurley heaped insults upon her head. So I would not have begged the king's leave to settle our dispute on the field of combat." "Weaselly little bastard," Sir Stephen spat. "'Tis no wonder he always hid behind those hulking guards of his, letting others fight his battles instead of facing one like a man. He had no talent with a sword." Sir Adam grunted his agreement. It had taken Robert mere minutes to defeat Hurley, but after conceding the battle, the blackguard had attacked Robert's back as he had turned to leave the field. Had Michael not bellowed a warning, Robert would have been felled. Instead, he had deflected the blow meant to sever his head, then had driven his sword through Hurley's heart. "And now you and your brother are both earls," Michael said with a grin. "Aye, we are." Since Lord Hurley had had no living heirs, King John had bestowed the former Earl of Fosterly's title upon Robert, granting him the lands and remaining wealth that accompanied it as well. Robert did not delude himself regarding the reasons for this, however. King John had engendered many enemies and wished to curry the favor and acquire the loyalty of Robert and, through him, his brother Dylan, who commanded the largest garrison in the kingdom. Countless noblemen.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?